This is the San Francisco Chronicle from May 9th of this year, 2023. And right here on the front page is this article by Raymond Lee entitled, "Oakland Catholic Diocese Says It's Insolvent." And I'm going to read selections from this entire article and then discuss this disgusting case. Oakland Catholic Diocese says it's insolvent. Bankruptcy filing in wake of sex abuse suits. By Roland Lee. May 9th, 2023, San Francisco Chronicle, page 1. The Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland filed for bankruptcy Monday as it confronts more than 330 lawsuits over alleged sexual abuse of children by the clergy dating back decades. And then here comes a quote from Bishop Michael Barber of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland. Bishop Michael Barber says, quote, "After careful consideration of the various alternatives for providing just compensation to innocent people who were harmed, we believe this process is the best way to ensure a fair and equitable outcome for survivors," end quote, said Bishop Michael Barber in a statement. And then he's going to continue with the quote, this quotation. Quote, "Given our current financial resources, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland could not shoulder the burden of litigating 330 cases," end quote. So, what is bankruptcy? Bankruptcy is when you have a debt to pay, and in this case, it is payments that are owed to over 330 cases of sexual abuse by predators, criminals within the Oakland Roman Catholic Diocese. These awards in these lawsuits are supposedly too much for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland to pay the entire amount. So they say, well, in bankruptcy, what happens is you say, well, we have this much that we can pay and this much that we owe. So instead of just paying the full amount to person number 1 and the full amount to person number 2 and the full amount to person number 3, and then we run out before we get to person number 330, we'll split it up evenly between all 330 instead of just giving the full amount to however many before it runs out. So we're going to give less to everybody. That's what bankruptcy does. It's supposed to be a fairer way when there's only so much assets and there's more liabilities. So instead of giving full liabilities to the person number 1 and full liabilities to person number 2, we're going to figure out how much all of it can be allocated evenly, and we'll just give less to everybody, but everyone will at least get a fairer percentage. That's what bankruptcy does. So basically what they're saying is we don't have enough to pay all 330. Is that true? Well, we'll talk about that. So then Bishop Michael Barber from the Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland continues. He's going to be quoted again. Bankruptcy, he says, quote, "can provide a way to support all survivors in their journey toward healing in an equitable and comprehensive way," end quote. He wrote in a public letter in March. So we're going to support everyone in an equitable, a fair, an equal way. We're not going to give everyone what they're owed according to the courts that have decided how much they are owed. We're going to say we can't pay it all, but we'll do it in an equitable way. We'll pay everyone less in an equitable and fair way. That'll help them on their journey of healing, he says, to support all the survivors in their journey toward healing. It continues. This is still the quotation from the bishop of the diocese. "We have limited cash reserves, and insurance may cover some of the claims," end quote. the diocese said on its website. We are also exploring, the quote continues, quote, we are also exploring the potential sale of assets that are underutilized or may not be, it continues here on page A9, or may not be critical in carrying out the mission of the diocese, end quote. So they've got assets, they've got a lot of assets, but they're considering the sale of some of the underutilized assets or the non-critical assets, and we'll distribute those in an equitable way. We're not going to sell everything, no. They were charged in this molestation of minors, children, over decades, and those victims were awarded compensation, and they're declaring bankruptcy to say we can't pay it all, but we can sell some of our, underutilized or non-critical assets, and then we'll divide that up. How's that? Sound good? End quote. Not critical in carrying out the mission of the diocese. So all of the property is off limits because we've got this mission, but maybe some of the underutilized or non-critical, maybe we can divide that up. Sound good? The diocese will continue to operate. This is not part of the quote. This is part of the story. The diocese will continue to operate, and employees and vendors will continue to be paid during the bankruptcy filing in the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Northern District of California. The diocese's dozens of Catholic school affiliates are separate legal entities and will continue to operate normally, the diocese said. So we can't sell all of our property, and we certainly can't touch the dozens of Catholic schools that are operating. Those are all under different corporate entities, separate legal entities, so we can't touch them. And we can't pay out everything that we owe to these victims, but we're willing to sell off some non-critical and underutilized assets. Most of the lawsuits which were filed between 2019, the year 2019, and 2022 involve allegations of abuse that date back to the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, according to the church. As of March, 3 lawsuits were linked to alleged abuse that occurred over the past 2 decades. So only 3 are from the last 2 decades, but most of these hundreds, over 330, are linked to the decades of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But as the article goes on to explain, California removed the statute of limitations because those were basically off limits. The victims were out of luck because of the statute of limitations, and then California said, no, we're going to remove the statute of limitations, and those can be paid for as well. It doesn't matter how far back it goes. It continues, the diocese is a tax-exempt corporation and has assets estimated to be worth between $100 million and $500 million, and estimated liabilities between $100 million and $500 million. According to the bankruptcy filings, there are between 200 and 999 creditors, with the largest 20 being unidentified lawsuit plaintiffs, each owed an undetermined amount of money. A 2019 state law, AB 218, temporarily lifted the statute of limitations on civil lawsuits against any institution accused of enabling abuse. So the statute of limitations was raised against institutions that enable abuse. Just think about that. This is an institutional problem. As we'll see in a moment, this isn't limited to the Diocese of Oakland. As you know, this is a worldwide pattern that's been going on in the Roman Catholic Church around the world, not just the United States, around the world. And it's over and over. It's an institutional enabling of abuse. And so the statute of limitations was temporarily raised on lawsuits against institutions that enable abuse. Numerous California dioceses are now grappling with the financial fallout. The Diocese of Santa Rosa filed for bankruptcy protection in March, similarly because it said it did not have money to settle more than 150 child sexual abuse lawsuits. The Sacramento and San Diego dioceses are considering bankruptcy. So, all these different dioceses in California, Sacramento, San Diego, Santa Rosa, Oakland, they have so many sexual abuse cases that they're going to flee to bankruptcy court and say, we can't pay, so that they don't have to sell off everything. Obviously, this is a systemic problem. Obviously, this should go beyond the resources of Oakland. If all the resources of Oakland were sold off and there's still not enough to pay what is owed to these victims, it should come out of other parts of the Catholic Church. I don't know why it's separated up. If this is an institution that's enabling this criminal abuse of minors worldwide for decades on end. It goes on, this article, Barber was the lead plaintiff in an unsuccessful challenge to AB 218. So he didn't want the statute of limitations to be raised. He wanted those, look, if it happened to you in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, tough luck. Tough luck. But this challenge was rejected by the U.S. Supreme Court last year. The court denied review of the appeal without comments. California bishops had argued the law violated a ban on new punishment for past acts and said the law would be, quote, potentially ruinous liability. Well, the article goes on and talks about how many priests and deacons and religious brothers and sisters are supported by this diocese, just the Oakland diocese, and they're all going to still get paid, even though they're working for an organization that enables abuse, or has for decades enabled abuse, and says, well, we don't have enough money to pay for the victims of that abuse. Dan McNevin, leader of the Oakland branch of nonprofit Survivors Network of those abused by priests, criticized the bankruptcy practice, which shifts claims by sexual abuse victims to bankruptcy court rather than civil litigation. These bankruptcy actions, he says, quote, are really designed to stiff-arm survivors by limiting their options in court, said McNevin on Sunday before the Oakland filing. When bankruptcies are declared, it's about freezing discovery and really focusing on money. It's about secrets and keeping money away from survivors who have been harmed and really deserve reparations and deserve justice, he said. It's disappointing. End quote. The church said in March that Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, quote, allows all claimants equal access and equitable share in the assets available to pay. So we're going to give you equal share of the assets that we deem to be available to pay claims. And is, quote, a court-sanctioned, public, and transparent, quote, end quote, process that gives victims a say. McNevin believes the Diocese of Oakland has plenty of real estate holdings across the East Bay that could be sold to compensate victims, and that a bankruptcy is unnecessary. He expects lawyers for victims to challenge this bankruptcy filing. I'll be interested to hear how that goes. He also wants state lawmakers and California District Rob Bonta to investigate the issue, though the bankruptcy filings were made in federal court. And then McNevin, another quote, says, quote, this is a business model for them, he said. When all else fails and they're going to face justice, they declare bankruptcy. And finishes, I'm going to skip to the end. The article finishes with another quote from McNevin. Quote, this is the victim's opportunity to have an equal say in the process. Talking about a court of law, this is the victim's opportunity to have an equal say in the process. He or she was powerless as a child. The bankruptcy process takes it away from them. So now they're adults. They can sue in a court of law, but throwing it over to bankruptcy takes away the discovery, the bringing forth of all the evidence of the acts, and just focuses on, well, we have this much property that we can sell, and we're declaring bankruptcy and under the Chapter 11 process. And this is actually a much bigger issue, obviously, than just the Diocese of Oakland, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Oakland. This is about a worldwide system of trauma, purposely inflicting trauma on children. And it actually goes back to a very ancient struggle. The destruction of the ancient world was, as I've written in many of my books, including The Undying Stars in 2014 and Myth and Trauma in 2020, the destruction of the ancient worldwide system was deliberately engineered by people who took the ancient myths in a whole new direction, in a literalist direction. And literalist Christianity, which grew into the Roman Catholic Church, the Western branch of literalism that instituted feudalism and oppression throughout the Middle Ages, that destruction of the ancient system, the overthrowing of that ancient system, was in order to impose this oligarchical, criminal, trauma-inducing system, and destroying the ancient system. As I show in the book Myth and Trauma, the world's ancient myths are actually about healing trauma. They point the way towards healing trauma. And in fact, the scriptures of the Bible actually illustrate that, but taking them literally inverts the message. And what you have in this literalist system, this predatory literalist system that destroyed the ancient understanding of the myths, is actually a trauma-inducing system. And you can see that going on here. And this struggle to undo that feudal system that was imposed after the destruction of the ancient world is still going on today.